2, Zion Ahmed Beis is my understanding.
Yep.
Right where it gets wide, the 2 dots, right before it gets wide. He said he got a little past it, but I should go back to there.
Yeah, wherever it is, but
okay, let's go back to just the quote from the Mishnah. The Mishnah said, so this is right the 2 dots. There's just a quote from the Mishnah right before the lines get wide. It says you're not liable for idolatry, ella al helm davar, except if you're missing the halacha im shegas maisa, together with doing the action unintentionally. Meaning Beis Din made a ruling based on a mistake, and then the people followed it, not realizing that the Beis Din made a mistake. We already talked about at the beginning of the Masechta, that's for most of errors in the Torah. Same thing for Avodah Zora now. It has to be that the Beis Din didn't realize that they were ruling wrong, and the people followed it without realizing that they were wrong. Minalan, how do we know? Tan Rabbain, because the rabbis taught. Since Avodah Zora was singled out separately from all the other averas, there's a principle which means you have a group of things that are all together one rule. If one singled out, you can't assume that anything applies to the whole group applies to this one. That's what it's saying here. Is that Avodah Zora was together with all the other averas that have a punishment of kares, and we'll see in the next Mishnah, and it was singled out to have a different carbon, so you might have all the other halachas might be different. That's what it's saying here. So Yochel Yuchayvim El Shigas Maisa, you might think that you're liable just on mistaking the action without the ruling. So the answer is Nemer Kan Me'ene. It says here from the eyes. The manna was hidden from the eyes of the community. Nemer Halan Me'ene. It also says Me'ene over there, but when it comes to the Zakin Mamre, that's where the elder who makes a ruling against the Sanhedrin. It also says from the eyes of the community. Malahala, just say over there, in Chayavim al Helm Davar the only case you're liable is if with a ruling, it's a ruling, he accidentally makes a ruling and then the people follow by accident. Afkan in Chayavim ela al Helm Davar im Shigis Maisa. So this is not talking about this is from the regular era. So just like over there, it's only when Beis Din makes a ruling, wrong ruling, people follow it by mistake. So to here, Beis Din makes a wrong ruling, people follow by mistake. Now the more asks, we were going through and saying all the similarities between the Beis Din and the Kohen Gadol. So it doesn't say that Kohen Gadol is only liable when it's when he makes a mistake in the halacha and then follows it by accident. Right? That seems to imply that the Kohen Gadol is going to be liable just for simple mistake. He accidentally breaks the halacha without ruling against the halacha first. Who's the Mishnah? Rebbe. Mishnah must be Rebbe. Tanya, because it says Mashiach Avodas Gehavim. When it comes to the Kohen Gadol doing Avodah Zora, Rebbe Omer. V'shavin, but they agree, both Rebbe and the Chacham agree, Shebesira, that it is with a female goat that you bring. V'shavin, they also agree, She'ein maybe Ashim Talui, that the Kohen Gadol does not bring an Ashim Talui, that is a car. Normally, if someone knows that they broke a halacha that on purpose would be kares, they did by accident, they bring a regular chatas. If they're not sure whether they broke the halacha, that would be liable to kares had they done it on purpose, they bring an Ashim Talui. So Evan agrees that the Kohen Gadol does not bring an Ashim Talui. So right now we're saying it's a proof that the Mishnah must be Rebbe because it doesn't single out the Kohen Gadol as only being liable if he makes the ruling first. What says the Tizbra? Does that make sense? In the next Mishnah we'll see shortly. We'll see this Mishnah. Hopefully we should get there. That in the next Mishnah, it says that when it comes to idolatry, when it comes to regular vera, then you're liable only if it's something that is on purpose. It is on purpose would be kares, and by accident would be chatas. And same thing with Kohen Gadol, he's only liable if he does an vera that he did it on purpose. It would be liable chatas, and by accident and on purpose kares and accident chatas. Same thing with Avodah Zora. It says about the beis din, they're only liable. Would be on purpose. Would be liable to kares by accident chatas. And doesn't mention the Kohen Gadol there. What happens to him? So there, Mikatani doesn't say that, and that for sure we know there's no difference. What the there is about, there's for sure no difference. It doesn't mention though. That's true about the Kohen Gadol. Ella, so rather, why does it do it that way? Tani ha, who din la. It says in one, and same thing with the other. It says about a regular vera, same thing about Avodah Zora. So hachinami. So to in our Mishnah, Tani ha. It says in the first one, and when it comes to regular vera, it's only when he makes a ruling and then follows it by accident. Who din la. So and the same thing applies to Avodah Zora, though, even though it doesn't say it specifically. Just like we said about the community, same thing about the Kohen Gadol. It has to be when he makes the ruling and follows it by accident. So he accidentally makes a ruling and then he follows it by accident. So my time in the Rebbe. What's the reasoning of Rebbe that says when it comes to Avodah Zora, the Kohen Gadol does not need to make a ruling first. He can just break the halacha by accident. Amakra, the pasuk says, "Chiber Kohen al nefesh shugegis bechata." That the Kohen should atone for the soul that sinned that made a mistake by its sinning. Right, bishkaga says by accident. Nefesh, mistake of the soul. Zeh Mashiach. It says the word hanefesh. Sorry, becheta bishkaga. Right, the soul that right. It says one place it says the soul that sinned, another place it says it's sinning by accident. Sorry, I said that wrong. On the soul that's accidental, and the sin that right, and it's sinned by accident. So it's a double language. It says hanefesh, the soul. Zemeshe, that refers to Kohen Gadol. Hashageges, who did it by accident, Zenasi, that's referring to the king. Becheta, as it sinned, Bishkaga, by sin by accident. Rebbe Savar, what does Rebbe says? This sin is like a regular accident that just all it requires is Shagaga, a mistake in the action. Rabban Savri, Rabban Savri, no, it says Misha Chatas or Bishkaga. It's talking about someone whose Chait is only by accident. Yatsa Mashiach that comes to exclude a Kohen Gadol, Shein Chatas or Bishkaga, that is regular Chatas is not by accident. El B'Halam Dover, that it's only by when he first makes a ruling against it, meaning that Rebbe says we say that all it's saying is if someone does Avodah Zora by accident, they bring a carbon, and the Hamim say no, it's talking about a kind of person who brings a carbon for an accident. So Rebbe says it says if you accidentally do Avodah Zora, bring a carbon. The Hamim say the person who brings a carbon on a simple accident brings this particular carbon. Right, brings this carbon has this kind of halacha for Avodah Zora. But someone who does not normally bring a carbon just by mistaken action does not have the same guidelines for when they bring the carbon for Avodah Zora. To go back to what we said earlier, V'shavim, they both agree. They bring a female goat like a yaki. They don't bring a different carbon. How do we know? Dam Makra. So even though, and the point is that even though the Kohen Gadol, according to Hamim, has a different scenario in which he brings this carbon, but it's the same carbon. It does not bring a unique carbon. On a regular vera, he brings a different carbon. But when it comes to Avodah Zora, even though the scenario that brings it is different, that he has to first make a ruling, and the tzibur doesn't have to first make a ruling. No, so the individuals of the tzibur, I should say, the individuals do not have to make a ruling. The Kohen Gadol does. Nevertheless, the Kohen brings a carbon of individual, does not bring the carbon the beis din brings. Now, the verse says, "Vim nefesh achas." If one soul sins, it brings his carbon. Echad yachid, whether it's a regular person, echad nasi, whether it's a Kohen Gadol, echad Mashiach, whether it's Kohen Gadol, kulam echal nefesh achazain. It's all included in one soul. So any soul that sins brings this carbon. So the scenario that makes him bring the carbon is different for the Kohen Gadol, Kohen Hachamim, but Evan agrees it's all the same carbon. Okay. Daf Ches. Now, there's also agree V'shavin, as we said in the Brisa, V'shavin, everyone agrees she'ain mevi ashim talui, that the Kohen Gadol does not bring an ashim talui. That is, if he's not sure if he broke it didn't verify that it's liable to kares on purpose and a chatas by accident, he does not bring an ashim talui. A regular person brings this carbon ashim talui to say, sort of protect me while I figure out whether I did the avera or not. The Kohen Gadol does not bring that carbon. The obvious question is, Minalan, how do we know? Let's see the verse that says, "V'keeper alav HaKohen al shigaso asher shugag, that the Kohen should atone for the person for the accident that he did accidentally. So Rebbe says, how do you read this verse? It's only time. This is the discussion. This is the verse that talks about the Asham Taloi. Rebbe says, Mishikol Cheto B'Shgaga, and this is only talking about someone whose every sin is brought in a simple accident. Yatzazer, this comes to exclude the Kohen Gadol, she'ein kol Cheto B'Shgaga, that not every sin of his is by accident, because the Kohen Gadol, we said, when it comes to Avodah Zora, it's with a simple accident according to Rebbe. But other errors, it's not by accident. He has to make a ruling first. So we said. So Rebbe says this verse seems to indicate someone who only brings a carbon when it's a simple accident. The Kohen Gadol sometimes does not bring carbon for a simple accident. By most mitzvahs, by Avodah Zora, he does bring with a simple accident. But that's why it says all his sins are by a simple accident. Rather, what does it take for the Kohen Gadol to bring a carbon? Behelam davar, the hiding of halacha together with this accident. Now, ask, hold on a second. Midi kolksiv, does it say all? Does it doesn't say all. How does he know every single sin? It just says his sins by accident. The Kohen Gadol sometimes sins by accident. So why is the Kohen Gadol excluded? Sometimes his sin, when it comes to Avodah Zora, his sin is by simple accident. Why do we exclude him? It doesn't say all. And it says in, yes, it says all. Why? In king, because if it didn't mean all, you could have al shikagaso, or by his accident. His accident that he did accidentally. Why is there repetition? Hakamash that comes to teach us the ad ika kol chato b'shgal. It has to be all the sins are by accident. That's why it repeats the word accident. And there's some brackets that I think we can skip. The Rishon takes that out. So skip a couple lines. And so now up to Rabbanan. How the rabbis know that the Kohen Gadol does not bring an Ashram Talui? It says meshich chato b'shgal. Just simply someone whose sin is normally by accident. Yet to Mashiach she'ein chato b'shgal. The sin is not by accident. Meaning they just the same thing. They just need the all because the Kohen Gadol anyway always brings it does not bring by a simple accident. He always has to rule first according to the Chachamim. The more say continues. V'lo b'avodas kavim, and they do not bring by avodah zara. V'lo b'shar mitzvahs, and don't bring by any other mitzvah by accident. Ella v'helm davar im shigas ma'is. The Kohen Gadol only brings a carbon when it comes to when he first makes a ruling and then follows it by accident. That's when he makes a ruling. And by Sebastian Taloi, it says someone who does it by accident, a simple accident brings an Asham Taloi. Someone who's not liable for a simple accident is not going to be liable for an Asham Taloi, for the Asham that hangs. Okay. Next Mishnah, which we referred to just a few moments ago. There's Ein based in Chayavin, Ashi Yizodu B'davar, it shows Yoru, can't see. Based in is not liable unless they make a ruling, B'davar, on a matter, Shizidona Karis, that had been done on purpose. The punishment would be kares. Someone who did it by accident would bring a regular chatas. Same thing. The Kohen Gadol is only liable if he makes a ruling and follows it on something that is kares if done on purpose and a regular chatas by an individual who did it by accident. And when it comes to Avodah Zora, also unless they make a ruling, kares that it would have to be ruling on a matter of Avodah Zora that would be punishment of kares when done on purpose. And if he did it by accident, would bring a chatas. And the more Mishnah says, and everyone has to agree that the Kohen Gadol also same thing would apply with Avodah Zora, even though it doesn't say it. That's what we referred to earlier. The Mishnah left that line out. It should say V'chein Mashiach. It doesn't say it. That's why he said earlier the Gemara could say the Mishnah. We can sort of add the words in V'chein Mashiach, just understood that way. The Gemara continues. Minalan, how do we know that you're only liable on these things that are liable to kares on purpose and chatas by accident? Only there the community brings a communal sacrifice, and with the Avodah Zora only brings a communal sacrifice, and same thing the Kohen Gadol only brings in this scenario. It says to Tanya, because it says in the Brayso, Rebbe says, Nemar kan aleha, they bring it on it, he brings a carbon for it, but Nemar lahalan, it says later on, aleha, it says also there, you bring a carbon on it. That's talking about a regular vera, someone who has relations with one of his relatives. Malahalan, what do we know about there when it comes to forbidden relationships? That's only davar shedizona kars shigasachatas. That's only someone whose relationship is someone that if he did it on purpose would get kares. The accident he brings a chatas, because that's where it says in the text talks about the carbon. That's what it's talking about. Afkan. So to here, when it comes to the ruling of Beis Din, it's only davar shedizona kares, a matter that on purpose would bring kares, would be kares. The accident would be chatas. Only that when they make a ruling about that is when they bring the carbon of the tzibor. So we have four things we have to do. Prove. We have to do the tzibor by regular vera, the kohen gadol by regular vera, the tzibor, the community by Avodah Zora, and the kohen gadol by Avodah Zora, and it gets the melech also. Bring that in too eventually. So Ashkenaz tzibor, we find the community. Mashiach minal, and how do we know kohen gadol is only liable in this scenario, that it's the vera that's on purpose, kares by accident, chatas. It says la'ashma sa'am, when the kohen gadol sins which is the sin of the nation. The kohen gadol's sin affects the whole nation is the simple way to read it, but we're learning out la'ashma sa'am for the sin of the nation. Mashiach tzibor, the Mashiach is like the community, therefore he has this status. You can copy and paste from the tzibor to the kohen gadol. Nasi, how do you know the kohen gadol is only, the king is only liable, again, for something that on purpose would be chatas and by accident would be, on purpose would be kares, by accident would be chatas. Yelav mitzvahs. We learn out from the word mitzvahs. See if it says, Gavi Nasi says about the Nasi, V'asa, he does achas, we call mitzvahs Hashem, one of the mitzvahs Hashem that he's not supposed to do. See, but tzibor, it says about the community, V'asu achas, we call mitzvahs, it does one of the mitzvahs. So matzi, but what do we know the community? It's only something that on purpose would be kares and by accident is chatas. Af nasi, so to the nasi, that would be something that on purpose would be kares and by accident be chatas. Yachid, how do we know that for an individual, because the comment is only in the same scenario? Amakra, im nefesh, if a soul, and learn the top one from the bottom, from the top one. So just like in the previous paragraph, it's this halacha that has to be on purpose, kares by accident, chatas. That's where the individual will bring the chatas, which is a little bit self-referential, but not much. Okay. Similarly, now we have to do Avodah Zora, same thing. Avodah Zora, and the only liable in Avodah Zora on a vera Avodah Zora that would be liable to kares on purpose and chatas by accident, coming to exclude kissing and such things like that, which are just a vera, but not kares. So b'vodas kachavim minalan. How do we know about Avodah Zara? Tanur, but it says in the Raisa, shiyatza avodas kachavim ladun ba'atzma. That again, just like we said before, Avodah Zara single out from all the other veras. Yachol, you might think you chayavim, you might be liable for Avodah Zara, even on anything in Avodah Zara without a punishment of kares on it. Nemar kan me'ene, it says here from the eyes. Nemar lahalan me'ene, from the eyes. Malahalan, just like over there, davash is on a kares, shigat chatas. It's something that on purpose is kares and by accident is chatas. So to afkan, davash is on a kares, shigat chatas. So to something the Avodah Zara, it's only when it's on purpose purpose kares and by accident chatas. Ashkan tzibor, so we find tzibor. Yachi nasi Mashiach minalan. How do you know about the individual, the king and the kohen gadol? That they're also only, it's something that's on purpose, kares by accident chatas. Makra, the first passage says, im nefesh achas, echa yachi v'echa nasi, includes the individual, includes the king, they're all one soul. Echa nasi v'echa Mashiach, and so too kohen gadol. Kulam b'chal nefesh achasen. They're all in the soul. V'lama tachtim ne'elyon, and learn out the bottom from the top one, just like in the top paragraph, it's talking about kares with chatas, so too here. Hanika, that's fine. That makes sense. According to the one that we saw earlier, they use the word aleha to teach us that you're liable on it. Like Xer Shava, for an Xer Shava, we said earlier, just a few minutes ago, like we said, that makes perfect sense. El Rabbanan, according to rabbis, the mafki la aleha la rayos, that the word aleha that says someone takes a second wife on his first wife, it takes his wife's sister on her. In addition to his first wife, it takes a sister. Letting out from there that what's it called? That if in a situation with yibum, when someone would have his brother, let's say two brothers marry two sisters, and one brother dies without children, normally you do yibum and you'd marry your brother's wife, but if your wife's sister, then you can't marry her. Even if the brother who died had a second wife, just like you can't marry your wife's sister, you can't marry your wife's sister's co-wife. You learn that out from the word. That's learned out in Yivamos. That's learned out from the word Aleha. So if you use that up, you can't use that here to teach us that everyone's only liable for chatas. It's a chatas for something that on purpose. Sorry, the chatas for Vazara by something that's on purpose, kares, and by accident chatas. So how do you know that here? Minat lahu. So how do you know that? There's a rayas v'tzaras. Davar shuzon a kares. She goes chatas minat lahu. How do you know this halacha that on purpose kares by accident chatas? Nafgalu learn out min amasin le Rabbi Yehudah ben Levi the Great, as Rabbi Yehudah ben Levi taught his son. Torah achas yelechem lo sebeshkagat. It's one halacha for anyone who does by accident. But nefesh and the soul she'ataseh b'yad raman, the soul does it with a high hand. Pukshu kol Torah kula v'los kavim. The whole Torah is compared to Avodah Zora. Ma'avodos kavim shehayim ozin and a kares v'ashik goes chatas. So, just so you know, by Avodah Zora, it's only on something that is liable on purpose, kares, and by accident chatas. Afkan, so too by every other veret, shechayim in the kares v'ashik chatas. That is only something that's liable on purpose, kares, and by accident chatas. So ashken yachid, that's by an individual. Nasi Mashiach. Yachid, that's it. That's we find Yachid Nasi Mashiach. We find the individual and the Kohen Gadol and the king of the Kohen Gadol, by mitzvahs, by Avodah Zora and by other mitzvahs. That we have a source now. Sibur Minalan, how do another community that's only liable for this, that the punishment on purpose, kares, and accident chatas? Yalav El Yomitak, the top one from the bottom one. Okay, let's just go a little further because it started late, unless anyone objects. Rabbi, now, Rabbi Yehudah Nasi, who we did learn Aleha. How did Rabbi Yehudah ben Levi Ma'avile? What does it do with this verse of Rabbi Yehudah ben Levi that says all souls are similar? So Ma'avile Lekitani, he learns out what he says in the Brisa. When the Torah made a distinction between the community and the individuals, Rabbi Messiah, this is talking about an irei dachas, that if the majority of the community does Avodah Zara, then Rabbi Messiah, if they get the punishment of decapitation, monon avad, but their money is destroyed, their heirs do not get it. Yechidim, but individuals who do idolatry, the they get stoned, but their money is not destroyed, the heirs can get their money. Yochel nachalo b'karbon. I mean, you might think we should make differences in the carbon they bring. Talmud Lomar, the Pasuk Torah achas, was one halacha for everybody. Okay. Okay. Maskiv lo Rav Chilkiah. Rav Chilkiah challenged him Hegronia. Asked it. Taima. The reason that they bring the same carbon, lo chalak akasef, that the Torah did not make the distinction. Hachalak. But if the Torah, but if Torah did not say to put them, distinguish them between each other, I would have thought nachla they bring a different carbon. My nicey, what carbon could they bring? Nicey par, they should bring a bull. Tzibur shar mitzvahs who the nicey. They would be like, he says they would be different. How are they different? What could be different? Community brings the cow for normal mitzvahs. Nicey par la'olah v'shir lachata. So you should bring a par as a burnt offering and a goat as a sin offering. Tzibur v'zakalim who the nicey. That the community brings that for Avodah Zora. That also wouldn't be different. Nicey seir, bring a male goat. Nasi b'shar mitzvahs, who does Maisi? A king by other mitzvahs brings that. Nicey seir, bring a female goat. Yaki nami hainakarn, that's a regular carbon. It's not different. So whatever they bring, it's not going to be different. Okay, so we needed to say that don't be different. So I would have thought Sibur Maisi par la'ola v'sir l'chatas. The community brings a par for a burnt offering and a goat for a sin. Hani, these people by Nicey ipka should do the opposite. Par lachatas, a bull for the chatas, basir laola, and a goat for a burnt offering. Inam, or you could say tzarich ve'ein lo tegana, or it could mean that they need to bring a different carbon. There is no different carbon, so they're stuck. They cannot bring a carbon. They cannot get atonement for their sin, and unfortunately, they're stuck. Kamashwan, that's why I had to teach us that they bring the same carbon as everyone else.